Good morning, Scott Boats here. Today is the 8th of February, 2026, and this is a broadcast on male unity. How and why and how men must unify to save the culture, which really is about saving freedom. And of course, we have to save ourselves. We're not a movement. We don't tend to do that sort of thing. But anyway, we've got to figure out a way to fix this. Welcome to this TikTok Live, and let's get this thing going. I don't know why it shows up all the time as judicial surety bonds on TikTok. That's the title. That's not what I'm talking about, obviously. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. And so let's get this show on the road. Good morning, Scott Boats here on why and how men must unite to save American culture. This is a TikTok live for the 8th day of February 2026. Right now, lots of people are preparing to watch the National Football League's big game. The commercials, the dueling halftime spectacles, and the distractions associated with all that. Despite all the games, all the circuses, something serious is unfolding in our culture because our culture is adrift. Men are losing the culture regardless of all of our big games, which we enjoy, and most men don't even realize it. What are the stakes? I could talk about our sons and the culture itself, but really it's more esoteric. It's deeper than that. It's about personal freedom and our future, what kind of culture we have in the future. It's really possible, or is it really possible, that we will, through consensus building, relationship building, that sort of fixation, if you will, which are the hallmarks of the feminine principle, is it possible that we will effectively negotiate away or give away our greatest freedoms, including the First Amendment? Yes, it is. It seems like that is exactly where we're heading. American culture is out of balance, and the culture once marked by freedom is now at risk because our culture is imbalanced against the masculine principle. Yes, it is against boys, men, against dads, and against fatherhood, but the true imbalance is about energy, human energy, and how energy is directed. It's not about gender or the expression of gender or sex or sexual identity. It's not about the physical sexual expression at all. Rather, the imbalance is about the energy which the culture allows to be expressed. The imbalance is about the loss of masculine virtues, uh, being mission driven, expressing maverick personalities, virtues that build, and ultimately it's about the loss of original creative expression in education and in the framing, for example, of history, in religion and the expression of spirituality, in the public square and the expression of ideas, and the loss of creative expression through our own personal choices. Today, we elevate comfort over the courage to speak out. We elevate safety over the strength to resist toxic narratives. We elevate emotion over the discipline to engage in civil discourse. We elevate protection over responsibility and assuming responsibility for our own choices. And most prominently, we elevate conformity. We elevate conformity and control over the right to choose our own personal path. Since our culture suppresses the masculine principle, boys are confused. Boys are 50% more likely than girls to say that they don't feel like they belong in school. And 70% of D and F students are boys. Since our culture suppresses the masculine principle, men withdraw and grow silent. Male labor force participation has dropped from 87% to only 68%, almost 20 percentage points, in only 40 years. In that same period of time, men ages 25 to 34 without a college degree are only 78% employed now, down from 96% back then. Since our culture suppresses the masculine principle, fathers grow optional. In contested child custody cases, fathers receive primary custody only 7% of the time, according to a study in the Massachusetts court system. Look, that's not about compassionate. That is not a compassionate culture. It's a destabilized culture. The masculine principle has been sidelined and silenced in the United States. The culture is adrift in continuous hostility and fragmentation. The Pew Research Center finds supermajorities among both Republicans and Democrats who describe the other party's voters as being immoral and dishonest. That is fragmentation and hostility. Likewise, we're a nation of tribes, a nation of mobs, really, fighting over security because no one is building structure, moral structure, intellectual structure anymore. Both Pew and Gallup's trust anger measures, they show polarization at an all-time high. It's typified by security-seeking coalitions in tribes, in groups throughout our society. That's why men must unite, not to dominate, but to stabilize, as we always have. Across philosophy, myth, and psychology, the masculine and feminine, they're not really moral categories. They're always complementary energies. For example, the feminine principle is about preservation and protection, containment and bonding, security and stabilization. The masculine principle, in contrast, but in complement to all of that, is about direction, decisive action, penetration, risk bearing, structuring, responsibility under uncertainty. It's about expansion. This is not about more control under the guise of security or protection. It is rather about anchoring. This is not about more power, it's about shouldering the risks associated with change. The masculine is the builder. The masculine is the boundary setter. The masculine is the risk taker. And the masculine is the sacrificial protector. In the absence of the masculine principle, our culture has collapsed into appetite, demand, and consumption, into fear, rivalry, and hoarding, into endless grievances. Men never unite to merely rule. Men always seek a mission. Men always seek to build something better. It's in our DNA. And that includes building a better society. Male unity is not an attack on women and girls. This is not about gender. Male unity is not about an attack on women and girls because all of life is energy. And energy must be directed. We either create or we decline in life. There is no neutral. There's no permanent plateau. There is no cultural stasis. When we stop building in life, when we lose men, then we decline. The masculine principle doesn't force, it chooses creation. It takes appetite and it disciplines it. It takes fear and it steadies it, gives it some structure. It takes rivalries and it organizes those rivalries into a rational order. It builds families, it builds institutions. The masculine builds the only cultures that ever last. Men must unite not to dominate, but to direct energy toward creation, again, And again, for men, advocacy for men is not misogyny. That is utterly impossible in a gynocentric culture. That is a culture where the feminine is favored to the exclusion of the expression of the masculine. Second wave feminism stopped being about equality. It is now about domination. It kills both creativity and human progress. Male unity is about a call for balance, balance in law. We must give equal protection under the law, the 14th Amendment, to all dads. It's about balance in education. We must start educating boys as young men, not as future young women. Remember, don't confuse the expression of the masculine and feminine energies with the expression of physical, sexual preferences or identity. This is about what's within us, about the energy, not the physical expression. So, male unity is about balance in culture and demands viewpoint diversity that is the creative force which is within us, not merely forced compliance with physical preferences which destroy the masculine principle. So today, I offer you a blueprint for men uniting legally, culturally, practically. This is an invitation to join a movement that transcend primitive tribal alliances fixated on the external. And to transcend self-absorbed social and political rivalries designed to divide us and to sustain the primitive tribes which have always held us back. Let's get into it. Part two, the masculine and feminine principles. The masculine and feminine in American history. How about that? First, the founding vision, balance by design. America's founding fathers understood something fundamental, the importance of duality. They drew from Enlightenment philosophy, philosophy that emphasized balance between opposing forces. Columbia is America's patron goddess, the feminine principle. That is liberty, wisdom, and justice. But the founders built a constitutional, rules based system, duality. Uh, and that, by the way, constitutional rules based, you can't get any more masculine principle than that. The Constitution represents continuity of order, not subjective feelings, not norms that change with cultural fads or societal contagions. Our system is about stability, framework, rules. The protection is the system itself, not the sensations or the feelings of the moment. The Constitution balances competing forces, federal versus state, executive versus legislative, individual rights versus the greatest good for the greatest many. America was founded on complementary principles, in other words, the masculine and the feminine, not dominance of one over the other. It's not gynocentric and it's not androcentric. It's not about promoting either the feminine or the masculine to the exclusion of the other duality. But gender roles changed over time. Pre-industrial America looked a lot different. The father was a moral educator. He was head of household production. Mother was his domestic partner. Then the Industrial Revolution came and men moved into factories. So separate spheres, home versus work, appeared. But both spheres were always valued. The 20th century brought world wars which showed us something. We need both masculine strength and feminine resilience. Then came the 60s and 70s. Got it. Necessary corrections for women's equality, important changes. But the pendulum hasn't stopped changing, and the balance is now out of whack. The masculine and feminine American law and the legal framework from coverture to overcorrection. So let's talk about historical realities. but many people still treat those historical realities as if they are current events, and they are not. Coverture laws treated married women as legal extensions of their husbands. But come on, that was then and this is now. We made extraordinary and necessary reforms. The 19th Amendment, a woman's right to vote. The Title VII, equal employment rights for women. Title IX, equal educational rights for women. But then came the overcorrection. Laws and policies now systematically disadvantage men and dads. Women get traditional female protections and modern male rights. Men lose traditional authority, but we don't gain any equivalent protections. Examples: family law. Women gained equal property rights. Got it. But men lost family based authority and gained no presumption of parental importance. In the workplace, women gained equal pay and promotion rights, but men still account for 95% of workplace deaths. Again, no special protections for men for what men have lost. With social expectations, women can choose career or family or both. And when she's a girl boss or she's a cat lady, it doesn't matter. Women still get the same main stage attention from a culture fixated on physical expression. In criminal justice, women receive 63% shorter sentences than men for identical crimes. Men receive harsher treatment with no equal protection in sentencing. Domestic violence. Women are presumed to be the victims under the bigoted Duluth model for domestic violence. Women also have VAWA and extensive support systems. Meanwhile, male victims are diminished or ignored or simply disbelieved. In short, law's a mess. So that brings us to equal protection under the law, but not for dads. The masculine and feminine became imbalanced through law. Look at the child custody statistics. Nationwide, moms receive primary custody in approximately 80% of cases. That includes the uncontested ones. On average, mothers receive 65% of the custody time with the kids. Fathers get about 35%. Only 6.6% of dads receive sole custody. Custody, shared physical custody is granted in only 12.8% of cases nationwide. Men who fight for custody can win. But you see, the system requires indeed that you fight and spend a lot of money just to reach equal. Meanwhile, moms receive all statutory presumptions, whether through black letter law or practical outcomes. Notably, over 50% of the family law judges are female. Over 70% of the family law bar is female, and 80% of the people who surround the family law court chaos, the mental health people, 80% female. It is gynocentric. Nonetheless, let's look at the civil rights blind spots. Title IX created educational opportunities for women. Good. Zero equivalent support structures, however. Zero equivalent support structures for boys. And boys are falling behind, obviously, markedly, in education. The Violence Against Women Act, VAWA, provides important protections. Got it. That's very important, VAWA. But there's no equivalent recognition for male victims and no protections against false allegations. Selective service. Only men must register at 18. Women face no equivalent civic obligation or duty. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection. Yet, sex-based disparities are the norm in family court, and they go unchallenged. leaving us with this: the masculine and feminine principles in American culture. The culture is out of whack, it's imbalanced. Toxic masculinity has become the dominant frame. Masculine traits are pathologized rather than channeled. Media portrayal, the bumbling dad trope, everywhere in advertising, throughout entertainment. The educational messaging programs are programs for girls in STEM, but no, that is science, technology, and math and so forth, engineering and math. The future is female slogan is everywhere, but there's nothing equivalent, okay? There's nothing equivalent for the boys, for the men. Imagine the reaction if we started going around saying the future is masculine or the future is male, which brings us to the fatherlessness crisis. 1 in 4 children live without a biological father in the home. That's 18 million kids. Fatherless kids are 4 times more likely to live in poverty. They are 7 times more likely to become teenage parents. They are twice as likely to drop out of high school. The cultural messaging, father involvement becomes optional or replaceable by daycare, by schools, or by the state itself. What's the result? Boys grow up without any model of the masculine principle, no genuine reference to the expression of masculine energy by the man who helped bring them into the world in the first place because he's been kicked out of the home. Part three, the evidence of imbalance against the masculine. Let's look at the education crisis for boys. The numbers don't lie. Women now earn almost 60% of all bachelor's degrees. That's a complete reversal over a 50-year period. Girls outperform boys in reading by more than 40% of a grade level. In 10 states, girls are more than a full grade level ahead of boys. Boys are less likely to graduate high school than girls. For every 100 girls, okay, for every 100 girls who repeat kindergarten, there are almost 150 boys who repeat kindergarten. From in a 1 year period, 2019 to 2020, male first-time college enrollment dropped by 5.1% in just over a year, in just a 1 year period. Do we need flag football for girls? No, we don't. We need to start educating our boys. And that takes us to special education and discipline. 2/3 of students in special education are boys. Boys are twice as likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Boys comprise 72% of all school suspensions and expulsions. We suspend the boys in school, and then we put them in jail when they grow up. That's not about any war on women. And the youngest boys in any class are 80% more likely to be prescribed ADHD medication. We are over-diagnosing immaturity in our boys as being a disorder. Clearly, we're not educating the boys in American schools. Next, the medication question. Approximately 10% of U.S. children are diagnosed with ADHD. More than 90% are prescribed stimulant medication as the primary treatment. But here's what the research has found. Medication had no impact on learning. Medication had no impact on learning of any actual curriculum contents. That's from a Florida International University study. Behavioral intervention. Behavioral interventions are obviously more effective than medication. Obviously so. But those require more teacher time. Almost 80% of the teachers are female. We're asking female teachers to intervene with boys behaviorally when they clearly, somehow, somewhere along the line, never learned to understand that boys are not girls. But so intervention, you see, requires too much teacher time and more training. Eventually, Understanding this, our boys don't learn the same or as well as girls in our current structure. So, when almost 80% of those teachers are female, they're not trained to respect the differences between a boy and a girl. I'm not talking about the physical, I'm talking about what's inside the human being. They don't respect the fact that girls are thriving. Girls are thriving under that system while boys are being left behind. We medicate our boys because they behave like boys. Now, the transformation that promises a greater crisis for men and boys. Almost nobody's talking about this. The biggest threat to boys and men isn't just happening now, it's accelerating every single day. I'm talking about artificial intelligence, the job market transformation that is ahead of us. AI is riding the entire job market, and it's hitting masculine coded work the hardest. Manufacturing jobs are being automated. Truck driving will be replaced with self-driving vehicles. Construction planning and logistics will be modified by AI systems. Skilled trades are safer for the moment, but even then, AI-assisted design will change things. The jobs that men have traditionally dominated, those are disappearing. Meanwhile, jobs requiring social emotional intelligence are exploding. Nursing, counseling, social work, jobs where women already dominate, those are exploding. Here's a brutal reality. We're preparing boys for a job market that is not going to exist anymore. And we're not preparing them for the jobs that will exist because they act like boys. And the teachers don't know how to educate boys. So the educational crisis meets artificial intelligence. Remember those reading scores I mentioned? Boys are already behind by nearly a full grade level. AI is making that gap catastrophic. The future economy runs on one thing: complex literacy, understanding AI outputs, evaluating AI outputs, using those effectively. You need advanced reading comprehension for all of that, and written communication skills. The exact skills boys are falling behind in our gynocentric, female-centered schools right now. So we have boys entering a world where reading, analysis, and communication matter more than ever, and nobody's sounding the alarm. The educational response gap. Here's what's even more disturbing. Schools are adding AI literacy programs, which is a good idea, but they're not addressing the fundamental reading gap with boys first. It's like teaching algebra to a child who doesn't understand addition. Girls are already outperforming boys in traditional literacy. Now we're layering AI technology on top of it without fixing the foundation. The gap doesn't just continue, it will accelerate. No child left behind? Well, unless he's a boy. So, what are the cultural implications for all of this? Here's where this gets existential. For thousands of years, masculine identity was tied to provision. That is, protecting, building, creating, providing for family. What happens when men cannot provide? Not because they're lazy, not because they won't work, but because the economy has fundamentally shifted and left them behind, just like education did, and they weren't prepared for the shift. We're already seeing that in preview. Male labor force participation has been declining for decades. Among men ages 25 to 54, it's dropped from 98% to 89% today. Now add AI displacement to all that. What happens to male identity? What happens to marriage rates? And what happens to family formation? As if those aren't presently in a big enough disaster zone. What happens to boys growing up in a world where men have no clear economic role? That's the family structure crisis. Everything in culture, from my point of view, traces back to family law courtrooms. Custody decisions often hinge on financial stability. Who is the primary earner and who can provide? When AI displacement devastates male employment, and all the data suggests that it will do so, fathers lose even more ground. The presumption against fathers gets worse, not better. Mom has a stable job, and dad has been disrupted by automation. So, what we must do about artificial intelligence, we have to act now, not in 5 years. First, come on, we've got to redesign boys' education around AI resilience. That means intensive literacy programs focused on the boys, starting in kindergarten, reading, writing, analysis, communication. I think they'll figure out their own genders, all right? But the stuff that matters, we've got to start teaching that. The skills AI cannot replace have to be taught to boys. Second, sorry, but they've got to be taught by more men. We've got to, and boys have got to learn not to compete against AI. In elementary schools, 89% of the teachers, elementary schools, 89% of the teachers, that's kindergarten, all right? Two, those are female. We can't have the humans who obviously don't understand the boys and don't understand that boys are not girls. We cannot have those people running classrooms any longer. Boys need male role models. Boys need guides for the world who are like them and have their energy. Boys don't need to be treated like a foreign species any longer. Next, we can't compete against AIs. We need a boy-centered approach to use AI as a tool. Boys can and will learn to leverage AI if we give them the chance. Fourth, we have to create pathways to AI resistant careers focused on boys learning as boys who will someday be men living as men. Let's teach skilled trades, creative fields, human centered services, all performed as men, not as a variation on a theme of the feminine. But we are independent and unique, complementary. Boys are not girls. Stop treating and teaching the boys as if they are. Fifth, address the obvious root problem, boys' educational underperformance, before we add AI complexity. You can't build on a broken foundation. America's educators have broken the foundations for learning by America's sons. So, the masculine principle in an AI economy. Here's what we need to understand. The masculine principle is not about specific jobs, it's about purpose. The masculine principle is about agency, building, protecting, providing. It is active. These energies can exist in any economy, anywhere, but they require intention and an understanding that the boys are different than the girls. Value that, respect that, celebrate that. We have to proactively create space for masculine contribution. We must cater to educating boys as boys. If we don't, we'll have an economy run by and for women only, not because of conspiracy, but because we failed. We failed to teach, instruct, and prepare our boys, which also explains the mental health crisis among men. Male suicide is 4 times higher than female suicide rates. Suicide among school-aged boys has risen 40% since 2010. College-aged men are 4 to 6 times more likely to die by suicide than women. Men without bachelor's degrees, suicide rates have risen 53% in 23 years. Men are far less likely to seek mental health treatment from a gynocentric mental health system that is dominated 80% by women who want to talk to us about our feelings. Cultural stigma also keeps us, not just confidence in the system, also keeps us back, and a lack of male focused resources. 80% of mental health professionals are women. In this culture, nobody is coming to rescue boys, men, and dads except men. Because whether she's a teacher or she's a therapist or she's a lawyer or she's a judge or she's a member of Congress or she's a future president of the United States, women stopped trying to understand that men are not women and boys are not girls. So that brings us to this, the zero sum budget reality. Here's something people don't want to hear. Public school budgets aren't finite. I'm sorry, aren't infinite. They're limited. Every dollar spent always has an opportunity cost. So programs for girls, STEM initiatives, women's scholarships, and all are all funded with the same limited pool of money, while boys are falling behind. There are virtually no equivalent boys in reading or boys in literacy programs in our schools. This is not about taking from the girls, it's about including the boys in the solution. But yes, my friends, we've done a terrible job for our boys. Of course, we've got to double back a few miles now, and we got to bring up our boys. And trust me, only men and a very few allies will be demanding that the boys be brought back up. We can't just keep moving forward, though. We've got to double back and get our boys and our sons. Part four, what unity among men looks like. Unity is a mindset. It's okay to say that the masculine and feminine are complementary. No, there is no such thing as the toxic masculine. And always remember, as you watch the big football game today, the idea of toxic masculinity, well, that was put forth just a few years back during another big game. Men have got to start sticking together. But supporting men doesn't mean opposing women. Masculine and feminine principles are both necessary. Model the masculine as it is. The masculine is strength. The masculine is responsibility. The masculine is provision. The masculine is protection. And that doesn't mean tolerating toxins given to us by the other side. Men are not required to remain in abusive relationships, and we've got to be trained to recognize that abuse. Don't tolerate manipulation, individually or at the societal, cultural level or in a classroom. Know that your independence is to be celebrated and never, ever denigrated or mocked. Abandon the tribe, abandon the village, abandon the collectivist mindset. You're a man. Find your mission. Follow your path. Refuse to be pushed into the herd. Now, unity in law, family law reform. We've got to demand statutory change, namely the presumption of equal parenting time. Only a collectivist tolerates the inherent insult of calling first, third, and fifth joint or equal custody because it's neither. That stuff killed the family. We must start with 50-50, not first, third, and fifth. Get over that. Certainly, we have to adjust for specific circumstances. Got it. But we've got to box in, you see? We've got to box in the discretion of these family court judges. We also have to rein in the costs associated with seeking time with our own kids through family court litigation. That starts with equal statutory presumptions. That is, we limit a judge's discretion. And equal statutory presumptions can make pro se litigation, that is, litigating without spending thousands of dollars, without spending a fortune on lawyers, that makes pro se litigation viable for more people. Politicians in black robes are not the wise sages on the hill. We get accountability from the law class and the judicial caste through stronger statutory presumptions equality for both moms and dads that can only be overcome through clear and convincing evidence. None of this preponderance nonsense. Likewise, we have to give dads due process of law against domestic violence claims. We have to call out the bigotry of the Duluth model for domestic violence and get rid of it. Flush it. Next, educational policy reform. We need boy-centered literacy programs, reading instruction tailored to how boys learn. There's a guy named Richard Reeves, brilliant fella. He talks about redshirting, the redshirting option for boys. We mature later, and then we're unstoppable. At any rate, we need aggressive male recruitment as well, especially in elementary schools where 89% of the teachers are female. We have to rethink the discipline policies, distinguish normal boy behavior from pathology. We have to reform ADHD diagnostic routines, require age relative assessments, not grade relative, age relative assessments of boys to avoid overdiagnosing the youngest boys in the class. Next, we need a serious civil rights expansion for boys and men. Expand Title IX. Expand Title IX thinking to the boys. Where boys lag behind, we have to create support structures. We have to create gender neutral application of the principle of equal protection under the law. Likewise, we must challenge sex-based disparities which exclude the boys and the men in education, in law, in the society. Resources, look, resources are always limited. So stop excluding the boys and the men under the guise of helping somebody else. Next, bringing unity to our culture. We have to reclaim the narrative. Masculinity is essential. Historically, it's been the greatest source of creativity and diversity in thinking and thought throughout every culture, everywhere, at all times. Speaking of creativity, let's celebrate fatherhood. Fathers are not optional or replaceable. Support male spaces. Men need brotherhood and mentorship. Challenge the bigoted media portrayals by the soy boys in media. Call out the bumbling dad trope. Demand positive male representation. Look, when the NBA and NFL starts to insult boys and men by pandering to gynocentrism, turn it down or preferably just turn it off and walk away. Create your own content. Tell your own story. Speak against the narrative. Add your voice to all these issues. Unity and action. That's what we're about. The masculine is about taking action. Men mentoring boys through big brothers, through coaching, through church involvement. I'm a court appointed special advocate and I volunteer for that, all right? And it's because everything's feminine centered, everything's gynocentric. You got to change that throughout the structure. Fathers and men supporting fathers and other men. Divorce support groups, custody strategy sharing everywhere. Professional networking, political engagement, school board elections, state legislative advocacy, celebrating the masculine principle. Remember the four critical battle cries in this fight. Teach our boys. 2, full employment for men. 3, equal custody for dads. 4, reproductive rights for men through fatherhood. Part 5, the plan for uniting men. Individual action is the key. What can you do today? We educate ourselves. Richard Reeves wrote a book called Of Boys and Men. He's brilliant. Also follow the American Institute for Boys and Men. Engage your sons. Be present with them. Be involved with them. Take them away from the screens. Get them outside and throw a ball. Make them run around. Or if you will, even if you debate with them, engage the mind in a way that men engage with other men. Be the model for the explorer and the creator, which you are. Look, the boy wouldn't be there. You can't make the cake without the batter. I think you know where I'm coming from. You are the creator. Mentor the boy. Coach, teach, Be a big brother, volunteer advocate, and speak up. When you see anti male bias in school policies, media, and your workplace, just say something. Just say something. It makes all the difference. Always, always vote. Always vote. And I say, vote like a dad for school boards, for judges, for state legislators, everywhere. Community action. What can you build through your neighborhood today? Start a fathers group in the neighborhood, in the church, in your workplace. Men need community. Support male focused charities, organizations doing the work that deserve resources. 80% of the homeless population is male. Part of that is we are overrepresented in both prisons and domestic violence claims that kick us out of our homes onto the street. We've got to start taking care of one another through male focused charities. Also, create content, blog, podcast, social media about these issues. Add your voice to the conversation. Run for office, and please, please don't sell out your brothers like all the other men do. Don't sell out your brothers. If you only get one term by standing up and acting out of the masculine principle, good for you. You've helped change the course of humanity, even though, you lost your government job. When others invade our spaces that have been built for men, rebuild, start over, or stay and represent. Either way, but don't let the pushy, insulting, and vulgar purple-haired screamers win the culture war. Push back. The people making the decisions must always include the humans who understand the boys and the men. And that tends to be the boys and the men and the dads. Last, legal and political action, what we can change. Support shared parenting legislation. Many states already have bills pending. Contact your representatives. Demand equal protection under the law. File complaints when schools provide girls only programs without equivalent for boys. Got to start pushing back on that. Likewise, speaking of complaints, reform family courts. File complaints against the judges or the guardians ad litem and the amicus attorneys who are out of control. I know there's a problem with the lawyers taking care of the lawyers and that class taking care of itself. I understand that, but you got to push back. We got to reform the family courts. We got to advocate for judicial training on bias and evidence-based custody evaluation. When judges are trained on domestic violence models that come from the Duluth method, you get a bunch of ignorant judges. Got to change that. Part six, my closing, my brothers and sisters. The stakes are high. Nobody is coming to save America's boys, men, and dads. But that's okay. That's all right. We've always been the ones to serve and sacrifice anyway. We'll just do it for one another right now. We're all in the same trenches. We're all in the same foxholes. When we have to rush into a burning building to save one of our own, we don't complain and we don't blame the one that we save, whether in Los Angeles or someplace else. So we've got a lot of burning buildings to rush into. The schools which ignore and over medicate our boys, the courts which disproportionately imprison men and denies dad's equality, they're on fire. We got to rush in there and save our brothers. Here's the vision. Imagine a culture where boys receive an education, actually receive an education in school, where fathers are presumed equal, where masculine energy is channeled toward building rather than dismissed as toxic. That's not a return to the past. That's a balanced future. That's also the only future where we actually retain our freedoms, our individuality, our true creativity, our protection from the mobs and the tribes and the villages and the herds. Please follow me. Please follow me on social media for more content like this. I hope you'll visit Boat's Law on YouTube and subscribe if you're so inclined. God bless everybody. Seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly, And know this movement needs your voice. When we lift up the sons we once were, we build a better world for everyone, like we used to do. So let's unite. Let's build. Let's get going. Let's take action. We know our mission, so let's find the path. Next week's topic, the boy crisis. Why 70% of failing students are male and how AI will make it worse. It's partly about the crisis, but it's a lot about funding and focus. There's still more to talk about regarding imbalance in our culture. Imbalance by ridiculing and diminishing the masculine principle, which is at the basis of who we are and our nation itself. Thank you for joining me. I'll be back next week. Thank you. God bless everybody. All right. Well, that's good. All right. Got some nice results from the viewing, and I appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed this. Again, this is not anti-feminine. I love my mom. I love my sister. I have one child, a daughter. This is not anti-girl. This is not anti-female. I cannot emphasize that enough. Duality, okay? Duality. Masculine, feminine. Can't make the cake without the batter, just to be kind of obvious. Thank you, Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash. Look, um, I appreciate so much your uh, viewing my content, and I sincerely wish everybody the very best. Have a great day. Go Cougs.